I want to talk about the NFL offseason's best staff hires, in my opinion. Now, if you are somebody who bets on the NFL, you bet on over-under win totals, or you bet on futures bets like I do, you really need to be paying attention to this segment, especially if you're someone who just bets on these games week by week, because the difference between teams making it to the playoffs and not making it to the playoffs and making deep playoff runs is largely dependent on who they have on their coaching staff. Everybody pays attention to just the players on the field and the head coaches, but the sign of a good coach is also dependent on who he hires on his staff. And there are some really good staff hires that I don't really see enough people in the media talking about. Like, a lot of people in the media just talk about who's better, who's the best QB, who's the most talented team, but I rarely see anybody on ESPN covering these staff hires. So I'm going to give you guys some of my best staff hires that were made over the course of this offseason. And once again, if you bet money on the NFL, especially over under win totals, you really need to pay attention to some of these, because some of these are going to win you a lot of money if you pay attention to them and you get on these. Because these coordinators, some of these guys are good enough to be the difference between a team that didn't make it to the playoffs last year, making it into the postseason this year. Let's start off with Kellen Moore. He was the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys for the last couple of years. And last season, I feel like he was scapegoated. And whenever I talk to a Dallas Cowboys fans about Kellen Moore, none of them want to put any blame on Dak Prescott. It was just all Kellen Moore's fault. And you're giving Kellen Moore to the LA Chargers, and you're giving him one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league in Justin Herbert. And something that Kellen Moore does really well is being able to get the most out of the deep vertical passing game. And something about Justin Herbert is that he kind of has been put in shackles. He kind of has been put on handcuffs with his previous offensive coordinator, and dating back to his offense that he was playing in under Mario Cristobal at Oregon. He was really never allowed to show his true talent. And what Justin Herbert does best is sling that damn football. And with Kellen Moore as his OC, he's going to let Justin Herbert sling that thing downfield. I think that this was one of the best staff hires of this whole entire offseason. A lot of Dallas Cowboy fans make it seem like Kellen Moore was just a god-awful offensive coordinator. But if this dude was so bad, explain to me how Cooper Rush went 3-4, 3-1, 4-1 as a starter in replace of Dak Prescott. You just don't do that with a backup QB if you don't have a good offensive coordinator. The Dallas Cowboys had a top 10 offense last year. Yeah, I get that their offense eroded down the stretch, but I'm not going to blame that on Kellen Moore. Does he deserve a little bit of blame? Yeah, he probably could do things better, but to just put all of Dallas' second half offensive struggles on Kellen Moore is just absolutely ridiculous. He wasn't the dude out there throwing those interceptions. Michael Gallup wasn't even that good last season. The Chargers got a really good addition, and Kellen Moore, this guy is going to elevate the Chargers offense into possibly being one of the top 5 best offenses in the NFL this year. You have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, you have Quentin Johnston out of TCU. Your offensive line should be pretty good as long as everybody can stay healthy. You're going to have Austin Eckler in the backfield. We saw what he was able to do when he had Tony Pollard. So for Kellen Moore, I think that him going to the Chargers is a way better situation than him being with the Dallas Cowboys. You got a better quarterback. You got a better receiving core. I think Kellen Moore was a really good pickup by the LA Chargers. Eric Bieniemy. When I talked about earlier how some of these guys are going to be the difference between the team who didn't make it to the playoffs last year and that team making it to the playoffs this year, I think Eric Bieniemy is going to be that guy. Washington went 8-1 with Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz at QB and Sam Howell, who started the last game of the season. And the reason why Washington didn't make it to the postseason was because their offense was crappy under Scott Turner. Now, since Ron Rivera has been the head coach of the Commanders, they've always had a top 10 defense. And with Eric Bieniemy calling the plays on offense, if he's as good as a coach as many people make him out to be, this offense should dramatically improve. Regardless if Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett is starting at QB, they have a really good group of wide receivers. Curtis Samuel, Scary Terry is pretty much a top 10 receiver. And you got Jahan Dotson, who is having just as good as a rookie season as Garrett Wilson was prior to him going down with that injury. A lot of people in the national media go to bat for Eric Bieniemy being a head coach. And if this dude is head coach material, then he should be able to elevate this offense. He was on Kansas City staff for the last couple of years. He played a really pivotal role in Kansas City, beating Philadelphia in the Super Bowl. So for Eric Bieniemy, now he's going to a place in Washington where nobody's going to question just how big of an impact he had on the success of the offense. We know he's going to be the one running the show. He also has been assigned as an assistant head coach to Ron Rivera. So if Eric Bieniemy is as good as a head coach as many people make him out to be, this offense that Washington has should be a top 10, top 12 offense. They got a really good group of running backs: Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, Chris Rodriguez, rookie out of Kentucky. If Eric Bieniemy ends up working out, Washington, without a doubt, is going to be a lock for the playoffs, and they possibly could end up contending for this division. It may sound a little bit crazy. They may not be as talented as Philadelphia, but you know those division games always tend to be a little bit close. I think with Eric Bieniemy, the Commanders are a 10-win, 9-win team this year, and I think that a lot of people are sleeping on the Commanders this year. They got Eric Bieniemy. The offense should improve, and they're going to have a top 10 defense. Vic Fangio was a huge pickup by the Miami Dolphins, and they made this guy the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL. And he supposedly was supposed to go to the Philadelphia Eagles, but Mike McDaniel in Miami, they were able to get him to come to South Beach. And when you look at Miami's defense, oh my God. They have a lot of talent on defense. They traded for Jalen Ramsey. They got Javon Holland at safety. Xavier Howard was battling with some injuries, but he didn't really play all that well, even when he was healthy. So hopefully with Vic Fangio coming back, Xavier Howard can bounce back. He should be able to get the most out of Bradley Chubb. Bradley Chubb had his most productive seasons when he was playing under Vic Fangio, when he was the head coach of the Denver Broncos. And every single season that Vic Fangio was the head coach in Denver, they had a top 10 defense. They were really good when it came to getting stops in the red zone. And I think when you look at this division, having a guy like Vic Fangio going against Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen is going to come up big time when it comes to slowing those guys down. For the Miami Dolphins, their defense under Josh Boyer at times was not good, so Vic Fangio is going to be a major improvement from Josh Boyer. And there was one person in the comment section that said that it took at least a year or two for Vic Fangio's defense to start performing at an elite level. No, it did not. As soon as he got to Denver, they instantly had a top 10 defense. They were top 3 in points per game allowed and red zone defense, and 2 out of 3 years that he was there. So for Vic Fangio, him becoming the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins was a huge get. There's a reason why he's the highest paid defensive coordinator in the NFL. The Carolina Panthers have defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero. Hopefully I pronounced that right. This was somebody who the Denver Broncos wanted to take over as their interim head coach when they fired Nathaniel Hackett. Ejiro Evero, he ends up saying, nah, I'm good off that. He remained the DC. And if you watched Denver last year, the only thing that was watchable about the Broncos was this defense. This defense was the sole reason why the Denver Broncos low-key had the chance in some of the games that were actually close. And now he joins Frank Reich's staff in Carolina with a defense that has Brian Burns, Jeremy Chin, hopefully J.C. Horn if he can stay healthy, Derek Brown. There is a lot of talent on Carolina's defense. And I think that Carolina is a little bit of a sleeper. I think they're one of the more underrated teams going into this year. And they probably are my pick to win this division. I think getting defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero was a huge pickup for Frank Reich. And there were a lot of guys who also wanted Ejiro Evero on their staff. So it's not like the Carolina Panthers were his only option. This dude is one of the best up-and-coming defensive minds in the league. Offensive coordinator Todd Monken, this is, if I had to rank all these staff hires in order from best to worst, I would have Todd Monken at number 1. Todd Monken is about to unleash and unlock the full potential of Lamar Jackson this year. What was holding Lamar Jackson back? A lot of people say Greg Roman, his inability to adapt his passing concepts to a more modern NFL level held back the passing production that the Ravens could have had in the postseason. And when you look at Lamar Jackson, now that he actually has some weapons around him and a legitimate offensive coordinator that specializes in getting the most out of the passing game, he probably is going to be right back in the MVP conversation. And Todd Monken, think about what he did at Georgia. I know you can't compare the NFL to college football, but you got to give this man props for winning with a walk-on quarterback. And I'm not trying to say this to discredit Stetson Bennett, but come on. How many coaches are winning with a walk-on quarterback in college football? Do you not know how hard that is to do? He also spent time as the OC for the Cleveland Browns in 2019 under Freddie Kitchens, even though he didn't call the plays that year, which was pretty weird. And then before that, when he was with Derek Cutter during his time in Tampa Bay, his last season there under Derek Cutter, they had the best passing attack in the NFL with Ryan Fitzmagic and Jameis Winston. This dude, Todd Monken, is about to do God's work with Lamar Jackson and this Ravens offense. This dude is going to be the most impactful offseason staff hire, and many of you guys need to remember this man's name, because when Lamar Jackson starts cooking and you start trying to figure out how Lamar Jackson just became this elite passer all of a sudden, you need to remember the name Todd motherfreaking Monken, aka we're going to call him T-Money, because that's how that Ravens offense is going to look with him calling the plays like money. Steve Wilkes, I know you guys remember when the Carolina Panthers damn near came close to winning the NFC South last year. They were terrible under Matt Rule. They fired Matt Rule middle of the season, and all of a sudden, Steve Wilkes has the Carolina Panthers playing inspired football. And there were many Panthers fans who were rooting for Steve Wilkes to become the full-time head coach. And he didn't get that opportunity. They fired Frank Wright. Don't really have a problem with that. And now Steve Wilkes joins Kyle Shanahan's staff. And Kyle Shanahan, his previous defensive coordinators have all gotten head coaching jobs. Recently, DeMeco Ryans, Robert Saleh before him. Steve Wilkes going to the San Francisco 49ers was the best situation for him, because now he's going to have the opportunity to prove himself and once again get another head coaching job, because he got the wrong end of the stick when he was briefly the head coach for one season in Arizona. Steve Wilkes is inheriting a already stacked defense. They already signed Javon Hargrave like they didn't have Nick Bosa already. You got a really good group of linebackers, Fred Warner. You got Hulafunga at safety. This is a really good defense that Steve Wilkes is inheriting, and I expect the 49ers defense to remain the lead under him. Brian Flores, he was on Pittsburgh staff last year. Mike Tomlin was really thrilled to have this guy on his staff. He was a linebackers coach, but really he was just all around when it came to what he was doing on that Steelers defense. And when you listen to Mike Tomlin talk about this man, he holds Brian Flores in high regards. Every time you listen to Mike Tomlin talk about Brian Flores, he says, this man Brian Flores is a really good football coach. When Mike Tomlin talked about bringing in Brian Flores at first, he couldn't believe that this dude was available. And he went up to his owner and he said, hey man, can we get Brian Flores? He said, hell yeah. And Mike Tomlin said, man, we got a chance to get a really good football coach. It don't matter what position we line him up at when it comes to what he's going to be doing on our staff. We just need to get this guy in, because this dude is an incredible football coach, incredible leader of men. There are a lot of people who have a lot of respect and admiration for Brian Flores as a DC. This dude, everywhere he's been, his first season calling the plays as a defensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, their defense went from below average to amongst the best in the league. His defenses are normally really aggressive. They generate a lot of turnovers. Now, I don't know how good Minnesota's defense is going to be this year. I don't know if it's going to make that kind of jump going from where they were last season to top 10. But this defense, without a doubt, should be way better this season than what it was last year under their previous defensive coordinator. Their defense last year was too conservative. It got carved up by Daniel freaking Jones, fam. Not once, but twice. Twice did Minnesota's defense get embarrassed by Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. So I think for Minnesota, hiring Brian Flores is going to be what keeps them afloat, even though their defense may not have a lot of talent. But I do think that it should be better than what it was last season. They have a lot of guys like Lewis Seen who fit perfectly into Brian Flores' aggressive style of defense. I think he was a really good pickup. And the last staff hire that I think was really good was the hiring of Bill O'Brien. People in the national media make it seem like this dude is going to be the general manager or the head coach. He's not. He's going to be calling the plays. And this dude is going to be a major upgrade over Matt Patricia. I was listening to Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless a couple of days ago when the news first came out that they had hired Bill O'Brien a couple of months ago, say that the offense wasn't going to improve at all under him. That's ridiculous, dog. They had Matt Patricia calling plays on offense. This dude was a former defensive coordinator. He never called plays at all on offense. Bill Belichick gave the perfect recipe, the perfect sauce to ruining your young quarterback. You want to ruin your young quarterback in his second season? Arguably the most important year for a young quarterback's development. Go ahead and make a defensive coordinator his offensive coordinator, and boom, you get a recipe for disaster. This man, Bill Belichick, got mad when Mac Jones sought outside help. Like, they need Bill O'Brien. With Bill O'Brien, this offense, it's not going to be elite, but it's going to be average at best. And that's all New England needs because they're going to have a really outstanding defense. And if you're a Patriots fan, you're happy to have Bill O'Brien on your staff as opposed to having Fatty P as your OC. And some New England fans feel like Bill O'Brien may be a better offensive coordinator than Josh McDaniels. Bill O'Brien, this dude knows football. Have any of you guys ever listened to a Bill O'Brien coaching clinic on YouTube? You need to go to if you're a real football junkie like me, because just listening to Bill O'Brien talk about football for 5 minutes, he's going to have you feeling like you're a football genius. But these are my best offseason staff hires from this NFL offseason. These are guys that a lot of you guys need to remember. You need to write them down in your notes because some of these guys are going to be the reasons why some of these teams end up overachieving. There are a lot of people sleeping on the Washington Commanders. I believe that they're going to be a lock for the playoffs this year, and I'm willing to live and die on that hill because of Eric Bieniemy. The Ravens are legitimate Super Bowl contenders because of the addition of Todd Monken and how he's going to elevate that offense and particularly that passing game. You need to make sure that you take notes of some of these staff hires that I just mentioned because some of these guys are going to be the difference between their teams winning their divisions, making it to the postseason, and maybe making a deep run in the playoffs.